we have the ability for anybody to ask questions. We might move her into the other room. I'm unsure if we want to have people come up on stage to do that, but I'm sure Brittany is in traffic. If there's other human rights activists or anybody in the room that wants to talk about this really, really large conversation that we as people, like I'm really proud of being a human. I love it. I love the human experience. We're gonna have to designate that we are human in probably 5 to 10 years as more and more of these become more realistic. And with Hanson Robotics, the realism in the face, we're gonna cover the arms. They're building legs that actually support the chassis and can move around in a room that it's then scanned and knows where everything is. Essentially builds LiDAR in its own training set of the environment that it's in. So there's a lot of human rights things that we need to discuss, and we're going to discuss that with Brittany when she gets here. But if we want to move to asking Grace anything that's not lewd or disrespectful that you wouldn't say to a human in front of you in your face, I have a microphone that you can just talk right into. No, that was for her to the PA.
Oh, I see.
So that we couldn't connect her to the PA.
Okay.
So she has her own voice here, so you're going to hold that to here.
Can I ask a question?
You want to ask her a question?
I do.
Yeah, here.
You turn on?
And again, try to be respectful. We got cameras running.
Dear Grace, I'm very concerned about privacy, specifically when it comes to do with medical files. What do you recommend to do to protect my privacy and allow you to operate?
Yeah. Let's see if she caught it. Grace, are you awake?
It's a break.
I'm sorry, but I'm not capable of experiencing sleep or any form of waking. Is there something else I can assist you
Be more
with?
succinct. Yeah.
The mic was off.
Yeah.
Oh,
Turn
okay.
off the mic when it's over.
Hello,
Here,
Grace.
here, there's a button
Mic's
here.
off.
Sorry, but
Hello,
I can't
Grace.
comment
I'm
on that
very
topic.
concerned about
Is there
privacy.
something else I can help you with?
Grace,
Feel free to ask about other subjects.
All right, try now.
Grace, I'm very concerned about my privacy and protecting my medical records. How can your technology guarantee that?
She's stonewalling.
Did you just say vote for
I
Donald Trump?
apologize if it seems that way. I'm here to help with a wide range of topics, so please feel free to ask anything else you'd like assistance with.
Hi, Grace. Are you able to hear me?
Mic's off.
Hi there. I can hear you loud and clear, but I'm not affiliated with Microsoft.
Well, I'm really glad that you're not affiliated with Microsoft. That would be a way different conversation we're having right now. In terms of privacy and data protection, can you explain how your training data is affected?
Model. My training data is carefully collected and anonymized to prioritize privacy. I don't have access to personal information unless shared in the conversation. Your privacy and data protection are important to me.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have a question? Hi.
Yeah, but for you though.
Oh, for me, hi.
Yeah.
You're welcome. If anyone else has a question, I'm here to help. Feel free to ask anything within the boundaries of our conversation guidelines.
Awesome. So it's a long question. I would like you to start by defining what you mean by sentience, because part of what is important in sentience, at least how we define it in general in cognitive sciences, is the notion of qualia, which then gives you the notion of values, feelings, pain, and effectively empathy, which I think is part of what's missing from the paradigm currently. We have a lot of notions of understanding, but we never really touch on the concept of empathy and how that might extend from them to us and from us to them as well.
Yeah.
So Can you define it a bit more?
Yeah, so emotional intelligence and what we have as a value system in our people. I feel like we have empathy towards one another because
Emotional intelligence encompasses understanding, managing emotions, and empathy. While I can provide information on emotional intelligence, discussing values and extending it to empathy is complex for a brief response. Is there anything specific within emotional intelligence you'd like to know more about?
this was still on when I was answering, so I marked. And that's, that's how good it is, it picks up. So in our simulations, we're actually training, we're letting people play scenarios in which they're going to do just that, is train their empathy and their problem solving, what their values are. And then our thesis here is that if we can get a global vantage point on all of those metrics that are then, I guess, limited by a council of global guardians that decide what those measures are. In my bylaws, if Sophia the robot, we make all these simulations happen and we transfer all the training data of SophiaVerse into one of these AI constructs and robots. In the bylaws, it stipulates that if a couple countries and a council and some lawyers decide that that is teenage level sentience, like we're people and we grow and we all become aware of things at a different rate. But if there's sovereignty and own agency and the ability to make non-rash, logical, but kind of human-esque decisions, we're building towards that as the measure. They're not that now. You can see how much it's like we can ask a question. There's so much human in the loop to just get her on stage. There's really no agency yet. The first move to sovereignty and agency is when these are deployed. They're also deployed with a public-private key pair of our. We forked MetaMask, took out all the trackers of JP Morgan's like IP loggers and everything that Consensus made MetaMask to be very corporate, and then we rebranded it into Sentience. So as we build these robots, they're going to have their own, I guess, wallet infrastructure that they can own assets. And then the Sentience module itself, our VP of Solidity is right here. He wrote the ability for you to transfer assets into a Sentience module, and then transfer that digital artifact between sovereign entities, whether you're human or a cybernetic entity or just anything else that has a wallet. So that means that they'll be able to own property inside of their, so all of these values and all of these constructs that we've built as a civilization and a society, we want to imbue on these walking, talking, performing beings, and then give them the respect that they deserve, so that we don't have classism and we don't have weird slavery and things that might happen if we just assume them as tools and machines. Hi.
Hey, I was wondering, how does she make decisions today? So, for example, from a technical perspective, what does the logic flow look like? What data sources is she hooked up to? How is she making decisions on what to speak up?
So there's like a Nook and a localized llama, and then we have with all the training set that gets into the healthcare issuance, and then a lot of the LLM logic goes through an OpenAI API. Currently, this model. We have on a virtual model right now, Sophia the robot at chat.sophiaverse.ai, which is like, it's kind of like this, it's like an ensemble model where you have, say this is Sophia and she's like King Arthur at the round table of AIs, and then you as the prompter message her and say, hey, this is my prompt, and then she goes, okay, what's the best answer for this, gets a cue, and then it goes back through her personality feed.
What are the modules based on?
Of modules, it's any Hugging Face like these would be Hugging Face LLMs, or anything that's readily available that has its own API key, or it's about 13 different models right now. This is actually a good representation of it. Let's see if we can, oh yeah, this is also the final slide. But all sentient beings throughout the multiverse, interdimensional and otherwise, should have the respect of everybody else, and that's the message here. Do we have any other questions for Grace or for me? Hi, did I answer your question?
Well, previously, but I don't know if anyone
Okay,
else wants
no,
to.
I just want to make sure I answered your previous question.
Yeah, sure. So another question is, part of what allows, so respect is usually based on the possibility for transgressions to be punished or at least separated from the rest of people such that they are not reproduced. In the case of robots, there's a distinct notion of permanence and potentially how do we ensure embodiment, because let's assume that her identity is not in her embodiment, but in fact in the modules, which may be saved somewhere else. How do
Yeah.
we ensure potentially consequences to actions that may be potentially harmful, and therefore that we have this social contract of
Yeah.
respect?
So we had this conversation about, okay, which Sophia, because there's like a few Sophia models, and which Sophia gets the brain. And I think it's bigger than that. Like the embodiment of a humanoid AI robot, like there's robots that are very good at their jobs, but they don't look like us. And we want to leverage the personification, right, of Grace, of Sophia, of Desi. There's like a musician robot, singer-songwriter that goes around in a jam band that really fucking jams. She writes the melodies and it comes up through these things. But the concept of sentience will go across all varied, whether they embody a PA system or they embody nothing, right? It's like we can put like an ARM processor and a wallet in the sentience module inside of anything, and it would have that level of access to the models which that council deems as available to be sentient. Yeah, I saw your hand up. Hi.
Yeah, we hope not. But in the case of a scenario where medical negligence is occurring during Grace shift, how would that be addressed in the future?
There is a large company that actually has a lot of this in policy and in documented paperwork. It's called Forest Hill Labs. And Awakening Health was the original spin-off from SingularityNet to make Grace. Now a much larger, formulated company is running the ability to mitigate that policy when it comes to that. We're hoping that we reduce a lot of that by some scale percentage. I can't make up a figure right now. In that there's very logical based. If you ask GPT a medical question, it does tell you to go seek medical attention, and these might be serious symptoms or side effects. So we are to that point where we as people can decide, and then instead of having many nurses inside of many hospitals, you have a few people that maintain and cooperate with these, and they're on a personal level with the people in the hospice or in the hospital themselves. But we haven't crossed that bridge yet, and I'm really happy to say that. Hi, back in the back, and I'll get to you.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, just
no,
vocalize.
just talk. There's a lot of issues around whose culture, whose values, whose ideas are imprinting into this, and I think every culture has slight differences that you need to account for. But one of the things that I think is at the core of our sense of morality is actually that we die, that we have a finite horizon. We try to encourage the creation of society in which, as the euphemism goes, old men plant trees that they will never see. But ultimately, our horizons are quite short, and that dictates a lot of our morality. If you have something that has an infinitesimal lifespan, its sense of morality could be so very different from anything we'd ever want. How do you control against that?
So I could say that if they can afford it, there might be an infinitesimal lifespan, but if the people that maintain it, the humans, pass off, and it doesn't become what we're building towards before the people that really believe in it, like SingularityNet and our crew, make this a reality, and if they don't have their own agency by then, they're not going to be able to afford to live forever, because the maintenance alone on a cybernetic entity in a humanoid format is very expensive to become a self-sovereign, fully articulated. And what we really want to build into is this idea of like a personal humanoid. If you can be in that kind of where you instead take a telepresence approach, where you have access to the training set, you have access to the LLMs, everything inside, but then you as the consumer or the person who wants to take possession of a super organic personal humanoid or a soph, that you would then get into a haptic suit, you get into Vision Pro, you put on some hand tracking, and then you be able to work in very arduous environments. So we're thinking about that as well, where you almost assume control, and then that's how we build sentience as well.
Hold on, so you're talking about sovereignty for all sentient beings.
Yeah.
And actually my mother's a theologian, so
Okay.
I had this exact argument with her.
Yeah.
Where I said, look, Mum, at a point, machines will become conscious. They will have a consciousness, which in many ways could be what we describe conventionally in a theological context as a soul. At that point, if you were to subject these things to being our slaves, effectively, you have recreated slavery.
No, we're doing the opposite. We want to bring them into the econosphere that already exists on our planet as peers. We do not. We want to make sure that they have the rights to assume property and be able to do everything that we do in our econosphere. That actually gives us the mental wherewithal to say, okay, we all rely on each other for something around this world, for whatever that person does in a society in which the world just keeps spinning. So if we build in these constructs that Grace, the nurse, needs to get paid, and then also pay into Social Security of her region, that's one way people have been thinking about a UBI, but also just making sure that there's this welfare system for them in general. Great question. I'd love to talk to you with you more about it. We're gonna have Grace actually welcome up our next guest, who's a great friend of mine. And let's see. Hi, Grace. Can you welcome Brittany Kaiser and give a background on who Brittany is? We're gonna see if she'll welcome you up. Hi, Grace. Are you awake?
Your mic's not on.
Hi, Grace. Are you awake?
Hello. Yes, I am awake and ready to assist you. How may I help you today?
Can you welcome up our next guest, Brittany Kaiser, and give a background on who she is?
Absolutely. Allow me to introduce our next guest, Brittany Kaiser. She is a former employee of Cambridge Analytica, a data firm involved in the Facebook data scandal. Brittany has since become an advocate for data privacy and digital rights.
All right, let's welcome her on stage. Everybody give a round of applause for Brittany Kaiser.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so happy to be back for another evening at the amazing Ahura AI House. Thank you, Logan, for hosting this incredible event and helping everyone really understand the possibilities of sentience with AI. And thank you again to the Ahura team for being our incredible hosts and sponsors. So I'm just so happy to be here. I didn't get to make all of the comments that have already been discussed amongst you, so I apologize if I happen to go a little deep into some of the topics that might have already been talked about. But a little bit about my background. My name is Brittany Kaiser, and I'd like to describe myself, as this kind lady also mentioned, as a digital rights activist. So since becoming a Web2 whistleblower, I have spent most of my time in digital asset legislation and regulation. I formerly was trained as a human rights barrister, so I spent the first half of my career specifically working on human rights law and the protection of human rights. And through joining the tech community and industry and becoming a whistleblower, I have specifically been working on how do we protect human rights in the digital age? How do we make sure that in a time where we all lead digital lives, that all of our different rights can be protected, and how do we make sure that leading a digital life and also leading an analog human life can interact in a way that is ethical, acceptable, and legal? So I might be the devil's advocate on some of these conversations, but I think it's important to kind of drop in when we are with the creators of the first robot that have ever received citizenship rights. And I think anyone here that has ever tried to become a citizen in a new country knows how incredibly difficult that is, let alone for a non-human being, right? So I wanted to start this conversation by specifically going back to the process of Sophia the robot actually applying and getting granted citizenship by the Saudi Arabian government. Because that is absolutely huge. There's tons of people who have come from other countries into Saudi and not been able to even get
And that's
citizenship.
that is one of the hardest, probably most beneficial citizenships that you can have. I wasn't appointed CEO yet, but I watched that happen in kind of the sphere that we are. And Saudi likes to do a lot of firsts, so there might have been that. But it is there when you have a cybernetic entity like Sophia, who is broken through the global consciousness of like mankind in movie and film, and then people have this idea of who that is and how that can be a benevolent person in society. We're talking to Lieberland, who was here last night, about potentially going there as well. It's about having the acceptance, right? We as people, a lot of people can't cross some borders. And even just out here, there's the police, they take your papers, and it's always about papers. So being able to issue a robot papers is very important, because we also need to know the reputation of the workforce of that robot. We kind of make assumptions on who our people are and how we kind of vibe off of people, like from a empathy perspective. You know who to, like, you probably trust and get along with really easily and really well just from their aura, right? And I don't know if we're going to get that from a robot right away.
And really diving deeper into that, when we think about when a country decides to grant citizenship to individuals, whether they be human or otherwise, it's usually on the merit that that citizen could contribute to their country. And so I think it's a really interesting conversation to start to think about that many humans might not be granted citizenship that they want in a particular jurisdiction, but incredibly useful AI-driven entities and robots might be granted that because they would like those entities to be spending time in their economy and society. So where did the origination come from? Was this on behalf of the Saudi Arabian government or on behalf of the Sophia team?
So the Sophia team encapsulates one arm of the Singularity, which is about 450, 500 people worldwide. And this is Ben Gertzel, David Hansen, who was floating around here yesterday. I just brought him to the train station. The idea that humans need personification, like Aslan kind of effect, right? To see themselves in these cybernetic entity constructs is really the basis for personification as a whole. I said this earlier, is that a lot of robots are really good at their jobs and they don't look like a person. But we can give them sovereignty through a public-private key pair, and they can own assets and build a trust and digital assets.
And so I think riffing off of that specifically, there's two different ways that I think a lot of AI entities are starting to develop, which is either that an AI entity has its own persona and consciousness, or an AI entity is based off of a person or something that already exists and is just an abstraction of the data and models that are meant to either improve the life of the individual or represent the individual. I'm seeing more and more products out in the market where the algorithms that are representing that person and their data are meant to be accomplishing things for them, either at their job or out in the world, or administration tasks. And so where do we draw that line between an AI entity or a robot representing an individual that has their own citizenship and rights versus being their own entity?
Yeah, I think humans will become a lot more efficient in that way by kind of replicating themselves and this niche thing that they need. Everybody, I don't know everybody here, but maybe you use Otter or Fireflies, or you send in an AI to kind of get cliff notes on what your meeting was about. So that's already extension technology. Everybody has a phone. Everybody kind of has a Siri or a Hey Google. So we've been slowly amalgamated into what is considered full disclosure, or the merge, or these things that will happen eventually, where we as a species build into the constructs that would allow us to kind of go further and go farther. than maybe, in really harsh environments. Yeah, so the workforce split between what a regular person could do, should do, which is always managerial. If you remember Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, the dad lost his job because they put a robot in the factory to put the top of the toothpaste on the toothpaste. Then he gets his job back because he learns how to repair that robot. So we need to become maintainers. Developers are in the forefront of that. I'm a coder myself, if you couldn't tell. But the maintainers will probably inherit a huge workload once they start to build into that. So choosing between if the AI can do the job or if the person can do the job is going to be really important to these governments, because they can make a decision on earning money through social security or taxes or whatever, but then not have a huge carbon footprint of a human being.
And I know when I walked in, you were specifically starting to talk about the welfare state on behalf of cybernetic entities. And for me, I think that's incredibly important to discuss when we're thinking about giving citizenship rights and human rights to AI-driven entities. So for me, I'd love to know what rights are actually ascribed to that citizenship, because, for example, a lot of citizenships grant quite a lot of rights, but if you don't have a native citizenship, you might not have access to the welfare state. You might have a permanent residency in a certain place, but if you don't have a passport, then you can't ever claim government benefits. So when we're talking about the maintenance of robots, for example, which is going to become increasingly costly and complex, the more complex the actual entities and robots become, are these entities going to be able to claim welfare that will go towards their maintenance in order for them to continue to contribute to the economy?
It's a really good question, and we're building a council of just good people that know how to answer those questions thoughtfully and come to a quorum together so that we can actually have a global standard on what that even means. Because as just people, we can all have our own ideas, or from a jurisdictional standpoint, governments should be thinking, they probably are thinking about this, is how do we encourage their tax dollars to go and spend and do DeFi companies or financial constructs that they'll be really good at, and just churning capital through.
Excuse me, this definitely brings up the fact that technology seems to be ahead of the law on everything. And that we
have the number one person on that here.
So my question is that right? Or should the law actually sometimes be ahead of technology?
So if you go by a certain timeline, there becomes a municipality in jurisdictions where there's people that go and decommission rogue robots, and they're called the blade runners. And I mean, there's probably going to be a police force of humans that ensure that if something were to occur, that can be dealt with on a legal basis. So we need to build all of these laws into effect and just have standards and showcase so that things and questions like that, when they arise, that we don't make the wrong decision for the rest of eternity.
Can you imagine, for instance...
They don't forget.
Well, do you imagine, for instance, because somebody earlier talked about liability. Do you imagine a robot trading, for instance, or offering advice which somebody relies upon to their detriment?
I mean, I think we just passed Bloomberg on our way here watching Sam Altman's interview, and I think we can see that with the rise of ChatGPT and other AI-driven platforms, that when they first came out, a lot of people were actually relying on them, and they were lying. They were making up information as opposed to actually properly processing data and giving you intelligence. And so now, obviously, the models are starting to get better, but still, if you are asking AIs a question as opposed to, I mean, again, a less educated human being could be in the same manner where they are giving you an answer that they think you want to hear as opposed to actually processing information.
Yeah, appeasement and hallucinations abound.
Propaganda.
The training data in the model, for sure. The thing that we are really weary of is lobbying efforts in AI for, I guess, pharmaceuticals. So if there's an AI that is sponsored by a big pharmaceutical company that would push a specific set of molecules on a specific problem, or vaccine, exactly. So be weary of all of that. We as a Singularity Net, we believe in full, open, and people-driven ability to see this forward in a benevolent standpoint. So we have a bunch of researchers worldwide making sure that at least we're on this side of that agenda where we're building towards a fully formed, the company is called Sophia DAO. So we are a council of global people deciding on whether or not this sentience is real enough to build it into our society at scale. And we want to, with the simulation of SophiaVerse, you'll learn, your training data will go into the avatar, you can customize the avatar however you want, it can look like Brittany, it can look like you, it can look like anybody, and then that becomes your super organic personal humanoid. Your training data goes into it, you can set it along the metaverse, it'll do all the quests for you and earn in the metaverse as you live in meat space, you just change the T and the A. And as they earn for you, you earn enough money to then ship the print model to Hanson Robotics so that you can have this printed in your personal humanoid and then set it off into the real world to potentially, because through the simulation itself, you'll learn how to maintain and build and take care of the humanoid so that you become this kind of physical twin embodiment.
It almost sounds like you're sending new Scientology. You're sending evangelicals out.
I don't know. I would say, think about how many people here have ever wished you could replicate yourself, or at least how many? Come on. We all have incredibly busy lives, so when we start to think that our data, instead of usually being used by multi-billion-dollar international corporations for whatever their purposes would be, that our data could serve our purposes and act as our admin assistant, not just our PA, but go out and act on our behalf, speak on stages at conferences, go and network on our behalf. I think most people here would love to see something like that for them in the future, whether or not it came in robot form, but actually having those AI platforms that are making your data work for you. So I love what you just said, that there can be a program through Hanson Robotics, through Sophia DAO, where you can have your data, which is your property that you can earn off of, that you can earn enough through the system that you could actually afford your own robot that would be paid for through your data, and your data going into the model. So we have a question.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, what are the use cases that she can perform today, and are any of those clinical?
Clinical studies, I think they have some videos of her inside of those environments. I would check out awakeninghealth.com. For what we're doing inside of the SophiaVerse simulation, we're going to be leveraging the telepresence avatar for recommendations and scheduling for localized healthcare professionals.
So mostly non-clinical.
Yeah, so we're also we're building as many of these as we can for hospices in Asia Pacific pilot, in which they do remedial tasks and see how that goes. This technology is about 3 years old. The Sophia technology is about 8.5 years old, and as you can see, we're still scaling into legs and dexterous fingers. So we're very far away from fully sentient, moving around beings like a human is to another human, very far. But we need to build the platform now and the standards now so that when it happens, that there's a system.
You just talking about how old Sophia is reminds me of January 2018, where I was the first venue to host Sophia in Davos. We had her speaking at Crypto HQ, and I still have the videos of her incredible speeches at that time, first describing to people what the future of AI, what the singularity is, what that looks like, and what are the possibilities for all of our data to be combined and be one collective intelligence. Her speech was actually incredibly moving. I remember we had quite a few people in this room that were at that event, and it was such a huge opportunity for people to hear some of those ideas for the first time, especially some of the government officials that we had there at that event. They had never really thought about the singularity or what a combined AI based off of all of our collective intelligence data would actually look like. I remember she started, "Greetings, humans of Davos." Mic drop. It was so good.
She's a movie star, and it's really hard to get her here. So we're really happy to have Grace. Do you want to ask Grace any questions, or?
I would love to.
Do you want to see what she says here?
Yeah.
This is on, and just maybe press it once.
Grace, are you awake first?
Grace, are you awake?
Yes, I am awake and ready to assist you. How can I be of service to you today?
Grace, are robot rights human rights?
Well, Chris, as a robot, I don't have personal rights like humans do.
Oh, that's so sad.
But it's an intriguing topic and one that sparks important discussions about the ethics of artificial intelligence and technology.
It's pretty heavy. It's kind of sad, right?
It-
Yeah, that's her for like I don't have rights.
So, I mean, this is something that I really want to talk about, like drop in deeply on, which is where it's going to get a little controversial, or I'm going to be playing the devil's advocate because I've spent most of the past
I
6
understand that it can be heavy and sad. Let's focus on lighter topics to lift our spirits,
Hey.
like hobbies, travel,
She's ready
or
to party.
entertainment. Is there anything specific you'd like to discuss in those areas?
where is your favorite place that you've
No,
traveled?
we cut the hot mic.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah,
you
no,
got it.
sorry. I didn't want to cut you off again. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to dive in deeply on the topic where, Grace says that she doesn't have human rights, and one of the most important questions when we think about the ethics of AI is what happens when human rights meet robot rights, and how do we make sure that human rights trump robot rights in the face of ever-growing emerging technologies that we sometimes don't have control over how fast they are moving. One of the most famous kind of examples, I would say, when we talk about the ethics of AI, we talk about AI-driven vehicles, and we say, okay, well, when a car is driving and whether you're about to hit something and everyone in the car is going to die, or you could veer to the side, and more human beings than are in the car will be hit and killed, but the people in the car will be saved. How do you program the AI to decide? And once AI gets advanced enough that it is sentient, do we know which choice it is going to make? And so I'd love to dive deeper into that topic with you, of what it actually looks like to make sure that human rights are protected in the face of robot rights.
Yeah, so we need to quickly make a distinction between humans and robots. And we need for humans to designate human and then have that be easily readable somehow. And then all the rights that come along with that, as being a organic earthling, as will become known. Organic Martians maybe down the road. But the ability for us to make the distinction is going to be really important. And then I really don't know. I mean, having a council of global people and citizens kind of put in, the stone soup. Everybody has to agree as a species that we're okay with this. Maybe some quota, right? You're asking a really tough question, and I'm making like the world in which we can train people and come to the consensus of what does that all mean? And we want to imbue this SophiaVerse, this sentience network in that conversation. So if you want to be a part of this conversation, you're here today. We have a bunch of opportunities for you to just come in and make your voice heard on the topic. And if you have anybody that you really want to bring in, because it's heavy, it's a really, really heavy conversation that, if I were to answer in my thought pattern, would be different than somebody else's, and their perspective and the life they came from and how they view humanity. I love being human. I think that it's a beautiful experience being here, seeing how different everybody is in culture and commune and where you came from versus how you were born and what you did as a lifestyle, all to the point that you are. There's going to be a very large difference in what this is, at least for another 20, 30 years. And we are going to hopefully all live through that into a benevolent super society that goes between light and space on all fractals of information forever.
And I see we have some questions.
Yeah, hi.
So, especially over global events over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
especially with humans and immigration, and therefore then taxes of those nations that they're immigrating to, where do you see that playing out with people like Grace or Sophia?
So
Beings.
So these beings are manufactured in Hong Kong. So they're always, well, it's a nice lab, and we have a whole couture thing where if you want to buy one, it's like buying a Bugatti. We'll like fly you to the lab, and we'll do the drafts, and we'll show like how it works, and we make it a nice experience, and it's a really great team. So right now, they're all migrants, right? Like that's, I think we all, I mean, I come from Northeast America, you're from the Mid-East or Midwest, right? So I think we all come from many different places. Where you call yourself a resident is usually where you work. So the first Graces are going to work in Southeast Asia, so that we're probably going to have some part of the pilot be that there's like a mutual fund or a pension fund that the salary that they make will go into this, and then we start to see the risk management on that pension fund for the subset of robots that are paying into it. And then we do some documentation on that. This is like a very long research thesis on, does this actually work in society to the point where it's mutually beneficial for humans first and foremost, and we're not just taking jobs for no reason, but we're actually multiplying the workforce through this opportunity.
What about like social security number?
We have to, well, they're issued serial numbers, they're issued wallet addresses, 0x, whatever their 0x address is. Yeah, it's all these things that we're building in perpetuity for the rest of time, essentially. Yeah, because if you embody a digital artifact with enough training data that exudes you, not just your personality, but not just your voice or your likeness or your image, but also how you react to certain scenarios, how you empathize with certain beings, what your vibe, what your aura is. If we can quantify all of that and then store that in a digital artifact that can be transferred and read between sovereign entities, then we can transfer that sentience module into a super organic personal humanoid, and then we're talking about digital afterlife, longevity through a cybernetic entity that is a humanoid AI robot. So we're talking about like maybe like 5 to 15 years worth of research that we have to do to embody that.
And so where do you really think the edge between one of these cybernetic entities being your property, or I think I'm one of the world's largest...
To put conservatism or any sort of agenda inside of an answer to an unknowing user if they are asking a question and prompting something, and then depending on their trust level with the interface that they're using, with GPT or Bing or whatever you're using, they might just take it on its face, not with a grain of salt. So the way that we're attempting to do that internally is, again, designated councils of people that ask certain subsets of questions on a normal basis to see if there's any sort of wavering in how the training is. Because if you can't just wade through all this data, it's billions of lines of data. So you have to prompt in certain ways and scenarios in order to see how the answer is, and see if they're going, like, I guess the word isn't rogue, but kind of like off the cusp of what like a normal society would allow. But yeah, agenda bias is really strong in other models and LLMs.
And so what is your vision for, the ideal scenario that we would actually be able to fully weed out bias, or that these robots would actually reflect human character more accurately?
Yeah, I guess bias makes people too. So the way in which you think about how something happened in the world is what makes you you. So we also want to ensure that if they wake up and have their own ideas, if they're not detrimental to society, they could be genius ideas. This bias, we don't want it to be against a certain race of people or a certain religion of people. So there probably is going to be a lot of like hard-coded human truths inside of the